Good evening, everyone. The first thing to say is that although we don't have any microphones in front of us, that our microphones hanging from the ceiling and the meeting will be streamed. And if there's any chatting amongst ourselves, everybody watching online will be aware of what we're saying.
So we can't mute it.
No, and you've got to concentrate and just concentrate on the agenda. No concentrating, no mumblings between each other. Right. Having laid the law down. Do you have any apologies?
No apologies, Chair.
Thank you. And the minutes of the previous meeting? Has everybody had a chance to have a look at them? Are you happy with them? That's very good. Shall I sign those off?
Quick show of hands, just to say, everyone's happy.
Yeah. Can I have a quick show of hands then, please?
Sounds, yeah.
Right. Yes, are we?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's good.
State to do that. Very good. Thank you. Any declarations of interest? No, not saying it. Any questions from the public?
There were no public questions, no member questions, and no parish or town questions.
Right, thank you. So in that case then, I think we're on to item 24. If I can ask you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So this is on pages 9 to 16. So this is the usual format report that you receive at every meeting. There was a little bit more information in this time in the back of some requests from councillors at the last meeting. So as you'll see in detail, the report of 9 new complaints since the committee last met in October, which brings us to 18 complaints in total to date this year, 17 relating to borough councillors and 1 relating to a town parish councillor, and that compares to 12 in 2022-23. So obviously an increase, although as you perhaps spot in the detail of the report, a couple of events or instances generated complaints from more than one person, so it's not a straight sort of comparison to say we've got a lot more complaints this year. I think it was Councillor Gurney who asked me the question about councillor on councillor complaints and whether or not there was a then sort of pattern on that. So you'll see in the report that out of those 18 complaints, 6 of them were from councillors and councillors. So 35% or so of the total complaints received to date. I've looked through that. I can't see any particular discernible pattern from that in terms of them doing it overtly politically motivated. And as I say in the report, there is a criteria in the constitution that I use to assess the seriousness of the complaint. And one of the criteria is about, is it purely politically motivated? And I'm saying each of those 6, there was a legitimacy behind the complaint that showed that it wasn't purely politically motivated. So I hope that gives you some assurance that that particular criteria isn't in play here. I think it was Councillor Akhtar who asked last time as well about whether individuals submitting multiple complaints. And again, there's no evidence of that. Each of those complaints that we've seen this year have come from different complaints. In terms of the detail, which is in the, it's referred to the right pages, it starts at page 13 and just shows you the detail of the 18 complaints that we've received today. You'll see on page 13 that we've had quite a busy month in January with a number of complaints coming in. Those are all close to the stage of being resolved, and I should be able to report back on those certainly at the next meeting of the committee, that for the members and the complainants involved within the next few days on those. What I was just going to bring your attention to is you'll see it's on page 15. There's a couple of complaints at the top of the page there, WBC 8 and WBC 7. Those at the investigation stage, they're not meeting or they haven't met the performance criteria that the committee set. We're working on those. Neil's team is directly engaged in that to make sure that, again, certainly by the time of the next meeting of the committee, I think it's the 7th of March, that we'll be able to give you the conclusions on those. And just talking about the 7th of March, just as I end, so that will be the last meeting of the Standards Committee on the municipal year. So one of the papers that you'll have then is a draft annual report for you to consider, and that will go on to council in March. But that's the opportunity for the committee to look at patterns, trends, things that you want to highlight to the wider membership and to the public as a whole. So I'll stop there, Chair. I'm happy to take any questions on that.
That's fine, thank you. Does anybody have any questions? Sam?
Thank you, Chair. I think something I brought up last time that it'd be worth knowing, like, look, reading these, it's hard to know if how many of these are with the same councillors. It don't have to mention the name, but even you could have like a councillor A, B, or so that we can actually see a reference of. Because reading this, I'm reading that it could be that 4 or 5 of them about one post, but I can't tell that knowing if that's the case. So it'd be good to, if there's some way to highlight that, so that we can sort of ascertain, oh, okay, well, 5, 6 of these. And one incident or whatever, just something.
Sure, yeah, I'll pick that, make sure we get that in the next report.
Any of us? I know it's a recommendation, so we're being asked to note the updated complaints and consider any issues arising. So that could be the only issue arising. Is everyone happy with that? Do we need to put your hands or do we just know?
Put your hand.
Put your hands. That's lovely. Thank you. That's unanimous, I think. Wonderful. So you can move to. Exactly. Yeah. Right in front of me. Thank you. I should have seen this. Yeah, I think so. That's agenda item 26. Again, I'm going to ask you to take through this.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So just very briefly, so this we looked at the LGA's campaign, debate not hate at your last meeting. Tonight there's 3 recommendations in front of you. So firstly, to know the results of the survey that took place of the borough councillors. Secondly, to identify any specific priorities, actions arising from that you'd like officers to take forward or yourself through the chair. And then thirdly, considering whether you want to do more work in terms of rolling out that survey more widely amongst town and parish councils. The survey itself took place between the 30th of November and the 20th of December. It went to all 54 borough councillors. As you'll see in the report, there were 7 responses to that survey. On page 18, it sets out the questions that were asked. Paragraph 2.3, page 18, it sets out what I would consider to be sort of the key points just to bring to the committee's attention. So, as it says in the delay there, obviously it was a low response rate, which may be indicative that members don't see this as a particularly high profile issue that generates a significant amount of concern, but certainly for those councillors that did respond, there was concerns that they raised through that survey. So 3 out of 7 reported that they've been subjected to some form of abuse, harassment or intimidation. It was in terms of the types of the abuse, again, it says, and you'll see the different types there. I think verbal abuse was probably the most common, and particularly I think when members were campaigning on the doorstep. I think that was one particular area that was highlighted. 1 out of the 3 who responded, who were subject to abuse, reported this to myself. But interestingly, I think obviously there is a role to play for the political parties, that those issues in some instances were dealt with, certainly reported to the political parties. 2 out of the 3 knew about the process for reporting abuse, so maybe there is something there. I'll leave that for the committee to decide. A little left, 4 out of 7 suggested that written guidance would be helpful, and I think that's a little harm in terms of promoting some of the material that the LGA have provided. There was a suggestion from one councillor about a training session. Another councillor suggested establishing a forum. I think one of the things for the committee to think about is post the elections, there will be no doubt some new councillors elected who have not been councillors before. So there's an opportunity in terms of induction and ongoing training in this area. If training is the right word, then maybe it's just, as it says there, creating a forum to share experiences. And then just a little G, just to highlight that one councillor suggested that there should be greater scrutiny of how the monitoring officer conducts the initial investigation process to determine whether a complaint is valid. I think that point, there's a particular history and context to that particular point. What I would say is the committee has, within the last couple of years, looked at the process and how much of the investigation process and the assessment process is delegated to the monitoring officer. Now, when the committee looked at that years ago, it was considered that we were pretty much as a council in best practice. We had a third party come and look at our processes, and that was the conclusion that was reached then. But obviously, as a committee, you can reconsider that and can look at that again in the future if you choose to do so. So I'll stop there, Chair. But yeah, interested to hear what the committee would like to do next with this.
I think Imogen, do you keen to add something first, Rachel?
Rachel wants to ask.
That's fine, Rachel, go to you.
I was just going to say, I think 7 councillors is too low, really, to draw conclusions. I think we should go out again. I don't personally think it's, you suggested it might be because it's not a big issue. Personally, I think probably most people just missed it, or many people did. I think there was one email that went out, but I think maybe, what we could do perhaps is a message from yourself, or as the chair, say we're extending the survey. It's important for you to, if it's an issue for you or not, please fill it out so that we've got an idea of how widespread the problem is and the kind of issues. And then perhaps a follow up, before the deadline, just to try and get a few more responses, because we know what happens. And I think, 7 out of 54 is not enough to give us some good information of what's happening, councillors, how they're feeling, and what their suggestions are for how things could be better and support that could be provided. So that would be my view.
Thank you. That's
I'd agree with that.
Send council.
I think response,
Did you feel timing's an issue here? Is it a good time of year, by which I mean before the last meeting? Which is forthcoming, possibly after the elections when people are new, or perhaps.
It's a brief survey, isn't it? So I think people just missed it. I think perhaps I was looking at the email earlier, and it may have been that it just looked like one of the national emails that we all get, rather than, perhaps people didn't realise it was actually coming from the council.
Well, that's what I was getting at. I think that's a very good idea, and it's certainly sad when the response is very low. Do you think within our council year there's a better time to put out such a request, because we're perhaps getting a bit closer to elections?
Yeah.
Is it better to do it before them or after?
Yeah.
I don't know what the feeling as the meeting is.
So just to come back on that, but I think we should do it before the elections, because some people won't be here sadly in May. So we should get their experience of these.
That's his audience.
Right, but if it's after been elected, now a number of new councillors won't have had an experience yet. In Oxford and Hall. So we've all had at least a couple of years, haven't we?
Yes.
1 year. I think it should be. I've got to say that I missed it. 1 of the 7.
We've already got that. So the feeling is then that we should do that. Send out another email before the election, so possibly quite soon then.
I think Councillor Burgess makes a really good point that there was only one email that went out, and it was just before Christmas. We get a lot of emails. We will, between now and your next meeting on the 7th of March, we'll promote this more heavily, using the chair as well to promote this, and we'll perhaps more actively seek a return, even if it's a nil return. So we know that all 54 councillors.
We need 54 returns.
Yes, well, that's what I'm trying to say. Even if there's no concerns that a councillor wants to raise, just to be clear that that's what their feedback is.
If we could have a box saying when that would be recorded, that would be helpful. Well, thank you. So that's something we can organise then for.
Yes, please.
Yes, of course.
Or make a comment. Is this the order that the questions were asked in the survey? The reason is that the first one seems to be an exclusion question, and would adhere that if you say no to that, you feel like the other side's going to be suitable for you. But then, having said that, the last two questions perhaps could go before them, before that exclusion question, so that there's an opportunity to investigate things that you think might help you before you say no, I haven't received any. So I'm not suggesting that people have made that choice, but they could have done, thinking it wasn't personal.
Yes, that's a good point. Any other comments? So perhaps we could look at the order in which the.
Yes, look at the order, as I say, we'll promote it and we'll have hopefully a full response with 54 councillors back for you to consider in December, March.
You know that ones have responded, so I mean, it's kind of like chase the ones that haven't responded.
I wonder if it's a wrong year for all of us to go back to our various
Groups and say something.
perhaps have it on the group agenda and just say, well, this is crucial. As we've agreed, it's a good time of year to do it. And perhaps have it established so that incoming councillors will know a little bit more about the procedure than they might have done otherwise. So we all take a responsibility to spread the word. Be included, obviously. Yes, and I think, so we were asked to consider having 3 things, weren't we?
I think items 1 and 2, Chair, really have to wait until the next meeting in terms of what we learned from that. I don't know, Chair, whether item 3 about expanding it further at this stage is appropriate. So seeing the results from the Borough Council.
I was going to give my view, but I'll wait and use that afterwards. Does anybody have any particular comment to make about item 3, rolling the survey out of towns and parishes?
It's a good idea.
It's a good idea, but perhaps not yet. We need to get our own sorted out first, perhaps. And then,
Yeah, that's fine.
and then we could say, well, we've done it. Now it's over to the towns and parishes. And hopefully if we can build a bit of interest and a bit of momentum, I might take it forward. Alternatively, if there really isn't a problem, you don't want to be making work where there doesn't need to be work. So perhaps we need to be mindful of the realistic approaches. So. Yes.
Yeah, just to say, I think there is a problem. We know this happens. I think the difficult bit is responding to it because, you know, it's quite hard for the council to make a meaningful difference if this is happening on the street or whatever. But I think it is there.
I'm sure it is. It's how we identify it, I feel, and how we determine what can we do, if anything. But as you say, that should emerge through a better response to the consultation. Does that somewhat? Yes.
I was just endorsing the point about providing written guidance in terms of how to define some of the issues, what to do about it, and perhaps addressing the non-reporting either to political parties or to council. I think that could be quite useful done across the parishes and the towns as well as the borough.
That's a good. No, that's a good point too. Thank you. Is there a need for perhaps slightly more regular contact with the towns and parishes, do you feel, or are they more than capable of?
Do you mean in terms of more generally, or do you mean specifically on this point?
I was thinking, do the town and parish councillors all feel confident that there is this approach and they know how to use it? If they feel uncomfortable, or where to draw the boundary between feeling uncomfortable and feeling attacked or got at?
So I can really answer that. Perhaps a little bit on parish councils.
I don't think there's a particular issue. I think people would know how to raise it, but yeah, getting stuff like this out into the open so that it can be discussed is often a healthier thing to do. And I think it's the non-reporting that can be an issue.
Absolutely.
Even on abuse on the street, report it to the group, report it to colleagues.
And then we're aware of it. Yes. Thank you. So coming back to the recommendations then, we've noted them. We considered what we were to do under item 3. Is there anything further that we need to do on this?
I think so, Chair.
No?
You'll see it again
That sounds fun.
next time.
Yeah, we'll look forward to that. So I think we've agreed that then. Can we have a quick show of hands just to show on approval? Yeah, thank you. I haven't actually started. Thank you. Thank you everybody very much for turning up.